All right, it is almost May, which also means it's almost race day. So wanted to use this kind of coaching review video a little differently to go over the Middle Mountain Momma course and kind of some of my thoughts regarding the course. Obviously, you've pre-written a good bit of it now, which is awesome. But just kind of thinking through like how you may want to approach fueling, hydration, pacing, all of those kinds of things. So, as you know, kind of the course here starts with that giant climb up Middle Mountain. And that really is kind of like I'm not going to say the crux of the race, but it's definitely where the pace is set and your kind of effort level that's where you're managing your effort level for the rest of the race. So, in total, it's about 18 and a half, 20, 22 miles. Depends how accurate your GPS tracking is. But that first 5 miles, by the time you get to the top of that first climb, you're 5 miles in. That first 5 miles, like, I usually take this first punchy bit out of the gate and try and get in a good position. So that's like your first mile. So your first mile of racing until you get to the section where you start to go downhill a bit before you start the really big climb. That's where I would go full gas. Like, there's going to be, it really depends on how many people are in your field, but there may be like, you're probably starting with, I don't know, sportmen or something will start before you, or so there might be some passing. There might be some other women in your category kind of like jostling for position. That first mile, there's some chunky rock bits. It's just a good time, like, obviously, eyes up, pay attention to your line. If there's a rider in front of you that you're kind of coming up on, be vocal early. Say, hey, rider coming, I'm going to pass you on your right, or I'm going to pass you on your left. Like, totally, like, kind of take control and just come around them where you think it's safe. Or if you don't have a good sight line, if it's a narrower section of trail, when you're still a ways off their wheel, hey, rider back, I'd like to pass when you get a chance, is what I normally say. And then, give them a minute to like find a spot. But if they don't move over, ask again, especially if you've then come up behind them. If you've caught a rider, you're going faster than they are, they should move over, in theory, if it's someone in your own category, they don't have to, but it's kind of the sportsman-like, respectful thing to do, especially in a race like this one where it's like a longer distance. It's not a lap event. It's also not a national championship. Like, riders should just kind of move over for each other. Typically that happens. There's very rarely like chaos surrounding that. But anyway, so that first mile is, I would go pretty hard. We're talking like 8 or 9 out of 10, pretty hard. And then realize that that's a mile. You're going 8 or 9 out of 10 for a mile, and then it goes downhill. You're going to kind of rest, recover a little bit on the descent. And then when it starts up again on this long climb, remember that this climb is pretty gradual. Like, it's the same steepness kind of the whole way up. This is where you want to settle into kind of that tempo pace, and this is why we practice kind of those longer tempo efforts. This is a pace that, like, you can maintain all the way to the top of that climb. So you're definitely, I would say, like, now you're at like a 6 or 7 out of 10, probably not more than that. You're just like steady pushing, you're not like slacking off, so this isn't like a 3 or 4 effort, but you're also not like 8 or 9, because you're not going to hold 8 or 9 out of 10 all the way up that climb, probably. Like, the climb is hard. So you want a steady pace that you can maintain all the way up. Then, of course, it flattens out a little bit at the top. This is where, again, like, once it flattens out, like, I'm probably going to make sure we're 5 miles in. I probably should have eaten and drank something or have carbs in my bottle already, but I definitely want to eat or drink something before I start the descent. Because I can't eat or drink on the descent. So I need to do it at the top somehow. That's, it's a relatively non-technical kind of top section at the ridge. Like, there's that section where you're kind of just riding through that grassy trail. That's a good time if you can get to a bottle, get to a snack, do that. The descent, obviously, this is just about managing your descending capability. Like, keep the speed controllable within your skill level. It's always slower to crash. So keep it stay in control. And whatever that means, like I tend to be a rider that like I'm going to make up time on the descent because that is one of my skill sets. And one of the areas that I've really developed as a strength. But you want to keep it within your skill level and your comfort level descending. The biggest thing I would say is eyes up. There's a couple turns that are like kind of come up suddenly. So just kind of be prepared, keep your eyes ahead, look where you're going. There's an aid station at the bottom. You're halfway as far as like distance at this point ish. But there's 2 punchy climbs coming. Make sure you have water. I would, whether you stop to get water or you carry water with you, however that, if you have plenty of water, if you've carried plenty of water, fine. If not, make sure you stop and refill. And then this climb is the awful one at the, there's a point towards the top. I think everybody's walking at some point. Like it's steep, it's awful. But I would say the beginning of it, this is another like, hey, I'm tired, but can I still get back to the kind of that tempo pace where I'm pushing that 6 or 7 out of 10? Even if it may feel harder than that a little bit at that point in a race, you're fatigued. So, but think about pushing, like I want to hold a steady pace as long up this as I possibly can. When I can't pedal because it's just too steep, just get off and walk. But like I always say, like the goal is moving forward. So even if I'm walking, I don't want to take a lot of time to get off my bike, stand there, sort myself out, push my bike, stop, push my bike again, stop, and then take a long time to get back on my bike. Like the goal is like keep it moving even if I'm walking my bike. And then just, get up here, same thing, manage the descent. You've got one last punchy climb. It's pretty steep again. If you can ride it. If not, at this point, you're probably tired enough that like whatever effort it takes to get up the hill, just do it. You also know that there's really not that much climbing left. You'll have a long descent. This one's super fun. It's got all those switchbacks coming down. And then you pop out kind of beside the road on this like flat 2-tracky thing, whatever. Again, I would maybe take your last sip of water, last gel or food if you have some, and then you've got a little bit of a climb. This one's pretty steady. It doesn't feel as long as it looks on the map, I don't think, ever. This is the time, like, you're almost done. Give it everything you've got. Just push. Empty yourself here. It's a downhill finish. So, like, just, like, push to that finish. So push that final climb and then kind of, again, keep it under control. You don't want to crash in the last mile or whatever this is, but keep it under control to the finish. So that would be kind of my pacing strategy. Food, drink, fueling. I always say, and you can set a reminder if you have like a Garmin or probably the Wahoo devices as well, but like eat every 20 minutes. I want to make sure I'm eating something every 20 minutes, excuse me. When I race, I put carb fuel, like some kind of like carb hydration mix combo in my pack or my bottles. A hydration pack is easier to drink while riding because you just have to like get the hose as compared to a bottle that you have to put in and out. But a hydration pack, that way, like when I drink, I'm also getting carbs. And then I supplement that with gels because they're easy comparatively to like just bite the top off and like inhale rather than like messing with chewing or packaging or wrappers or whatever. And so, yeah, my goal is to like eat something every 20 minutes. I typically, this is me. So this is like something I've worked that works for me. I try to aim for about 100 grams of carbohydrates an hour and about a bottle of water per hour or a bottle of fluid. So sometimes those can be the same thing. So like the Carbo Rocket 333 mix has 82 grams of carbs per bottle. So if I'm drinking one bottle worth of that in an hour and then adding a gel that's normally like 25 or 50 grams, depending on the gel of carbs every hour, then that's my 100 grams, maybe plus some, plus a bottle every hour. For me, like if my bike, I can carry 2 bottles plus a 1.5 liter pack, which is about the same as another 2 bottles. I would probably be able to like finish this race on just that and not have to bother stopping at the aid station. That also means I'm carrying extra weight up these first climbs because I'm carrying enough water to get me all the way through. So those are kind of things worth thinking through, like, hey, I can carry, what can I carry on my bike? That's the first question. And then, do I need to stop and refill? You'll kind of want to be thinking through that. In the past, I feel like, I know I did this one year and this aid station was not super obvious. Just make sure you check with the race director at the start and be like, hey, where exactly is that aid station in the middle of the course? And I would just ask him that when you check in. Only because I did this one year, I think it's been 2 or 3 years ago now, that I did this race and I don't remember, like I was counting on this aid station, I don't remember seeing it. And they were like, oh yeah, it was around the corner. Not helpful. I'm assuming they fixed that since then. I raced it last year, but I honestly don't remember. Anyways. I have no idea. But anyways, I would just confirm at the registration, hey, where's that aid station? Just so that you know exactly where that's at as you're coming up for it if you're going to plan to use it.